John, it's great to have you back as my sidekick again this week. And we're joined on the show by Matt Holliday.
Terrific guest. We've known Matt Holliday for years. Great MLB player, seven-time All-Star, 299 lifetime average, and he has two sons who look like they may be even better than him. So while we're going to be talking about the Yankees and Mets, which obviously is not very positive, we're going to have a little bit of positivity on the show today.
If the Yankees and Mets keep playing like this, they're going to have a shot at Ethan Holliday in 2025. We'll talk about the downfall of the Yankees and Mets, and we'll play hit or error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, I missed you last week. I soloed it. The show still had both of our names, the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.
Right.
But I did a solo act with Billy Epler. We kind of discussed where they were, and we'll get to the Mets. I feel like we should probably start with the Yankees, John. And the previous show we did, I believe, was our trade deadline show. And sure. I think I used the term in that I think the Yankees are about to sink like a lead balloon. I think that was verbatim. And I think you thought I was a little too harsh that day. I don't think I was a little too harsh. I didn't like anything I was seeing from them physically on the field, emotionally in the clubhouse, from a leadership standpoint in the clubhouse, or from the manager or above. I saw a lead balloon. Was I right?
Yeah, you might have undersold it. I mean, they are terrible right now. I saw Fangraphs. You told me 5.3% chance to make the playoffs. You know, I can't even imagine it's that high at this point. They have really been terrible. The starting pitching, I can't even believe where it's at right now. Obviously, Cortez out, Rodon out, but he wasn't good. Herman out. We know why that's happened. But, I mean, Severino, to me, is the shock. At 8 ERA, I don't think anyone saw that coming. And, you know, they can't hit, and now they have no rotation. 3 openers in a row, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, you know what's amazing, John? As we're doing this show, the Mets, who sold everything they could at the trade deadline, are 12-17 in the second half. The Yankees are 11-17. They didn't sell. I guess you could call them a buyer if you think Kenyon Middleton's a buyer, but they didn't sell for what they thought was a contender, and somehow they have a worse record than the Mets in the second half. They must admire the Mets. John, there's so much wrong with the Yankees right now. And I know this might feel like deck chairs on the Titanic, but I don't think it's deck chairs on the Titanic, because I'm not sure. I think there's probably a few managers who could manage any kind of team. I think Craig Counsell could manage any kind of team. Dusty Baker, Bruce Bochy, a handful of guys who I think are superb managers. You put it. This has been in a lot of ways, a push button team that Aaron Boone's had. And it's not this year. And I think one of the things is that Boone wants to kind of like be chummy with the players. He wants the players to like him. And every game I watch, they play baseball poorly. And again, we're an evergreen show, but just speaking last night, they're losing 8-2 to the Braves. It's, I think, the sixth inning. The guy on the mound has the best pickoff move in the major leagues, and Harrison Bader gets picked off. At that point, Aaron Boone asks for an instant replay. He puts his hands to his thing. He shouldn't have done that. He should have pulled Bader from the field and begun to scare for something. This season has been like Harrison Bader, Gleyber Torres fantasy camp. Like, they're playing a completely different sport than everyone else. They're trying to have like fun amid this. At some point, if things are going to go wrong, even if it's just for Anthony Volpe and other players who are going to be here in the future, can you say what the New York Yankees stand for, that it won't be just stupid baseball every night?
Yeah, I heard that on the broadcast yesterday, the questions for Boone. I really just think they're bad. I just think they haven't hit. They can't pitch. That's their problem. They have a -7 run differential. Someone asked about the base running. First of all, I do think Bader was safe, but, it wasn't going to be overturned because it was obviously, you couldn't tell for sure.
Why is it even close, though, John? You're down 8-2.
Right.
Guys but that's Bader. That's
think these
Gleyber.
Mistakes.
And by the way, Boone talked after the game was nonsense. They've made the most outs on the bases this season. They have made the most outs. It isn't, and by the way, it isn't like they're daring and they've got a lot of speed. By the way, I agree with you, John. If they were pitching and hitting, we wouldn't notice. But that was my point. In the past, they pitch and hit. You don't have to manage the team in a lot of ways. This team needs to be managed. At what point are you going to not just do the happy talk? Actually, we're kind of good on the bases. You're not. Are you watching the games? You're terrible on the bases. Look at the statistics. You're terrible. Stand for something. At this point, they are not making the playoffs. At least stand for something.
Well, I mean, part of his success has been getting along with the players and being good in the clubhouse and the players loving him and respecting him and wanting to play for him. I do think that is a big part of managing, and we give him that. He's moved a little bit away from the happy talk, I'd say, in the last couple of weeks. Probably not as far as you and I would like to see. I do think, it's good that you have that statistic. I do think they have not hit. We can't expect them to have a winning record. It's amazing to me they have a winning record when their starting pitching has been atrocious lately. Their bullpen hasn't been that good lately, and they can't hit. And Judge missed a significant amount of time. Now, I know you said Houston's got a lot of guys who've been hurt. The Dodgers have a lot of guys who've been hurt, and they've still been really good. Houston's been good. Dodgers have been great. Yankees have not been good. Obviously, something's wrong. It's not a good team. I don't think these base running issues are the reason, but, they do point to another issue that they do have. I think that's fair to say.
John, I just want to be clear. I'm in 100% agreement with you. And that's my point is historically under Boone, those first 5 years, they hit and pitched. So the tactical stuff, the camaraderie, all that stuff got washed away. And I'm agreeing. If they were hitting and pitching this year, who would care about the other thing? But they're not. And I agree. They're over 500. I'm going to stick with my lead balloon. This is not going to stay over 500.
No, I'm with you.
They're not good at anything. They don't hit well. They don't pitch well. They don't run the bases well. They're pretty good on defense. Their bullpen is a little shakier than normal, but generally good. But hitting and starting pitching are the core of the game, and they're not good at these things. And in some ways, John, I'm not exactly sure how they dig out of it. Because the Orioles are going to be good for a lot of years. You mentioned some of the teams that have survived stuff. Think about what Tampa Bay has survived this year. They've lost 3 top starting pitchers. They might be without Wander Franco now for the rest of the year. Who knows what's going on there? They always find a way. Toronto is better than them moving forward. I think Boston's better than them moving forward. What are the cornerstones of this? Anthony Volpe was supposed to be a cornerstone. He looks like a nice player. Is he going to be better than a nice player?
I think I have more faith in Volpe than you do. I mean, obviously the batting average is low. I think the defense is better than we expected. I obviously can steal bases basically at will when he gets on, and he does have more power than we thought. So, I do see this is a rookie year. I mean, you can't expect everybody to be Adley Rutschman or somebody like that in their rookie season. I think he's been pretty good overall compared to what we should have expected. Maybe we expected too much. I don't know. I am with you on the lead balloon. I do think they're sinking. I do think they're going to finish with below 500 record. I mean, their advantage is just like the Mets. Going forward, they're a rich team. The owner isn't as rich, but the revenues are higher than everybody else's revenues. They're still drawing fans. I couldn't believe it. A month ago, they were still basically selling out every game. I mean, a couple seats here and there, and this is not a great team to watch. Even when they were 5 or 10 games over, which they were at some point. I know it's hard to remember that. They're not a great team to watch. They weren't hitting. They were only really good on Garrett Cole's days, and now Cole has turned into the new DeGrom, right? They can't win for him. They can't hit for him, and they're losing those games. So I do expect them to finish with a losing record this year. I don't believe they have a 5% chance to make it. I think it's less than that. But going forward, obviously they have Judge, they have Cole. Those are 2 of the best players in the game, and they have the spending power. So they have 3 great things going forward, and I still expect them to be a winning team. Look, they've been a winning team for a quarter century, a generation of winning teams. That's pretty good. But I think this year the jig is up and their streak is up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Volpe has been misserved by whatever hitting geniuses decided that he should only use half the field. He should think about being a 300 hitter. I think he's, to your point, he does have a lot of power compact in that body. I think he hits 15 and 20 homers trying to be a 300 hitter. You combine that with the defense, which I agree with you has been stellar this season, much better than a little bit like Francisco Alvarez, right? In his rookie year, it's much better than was advertised, and the base running, good. John, let's flip to Francisco Alvarez's team here, the Mets. Look, I think there's another one where it feels like you caught up to me. You did a mea culpa in the newspaper. I liked what they did at the trade deadline. I think when we did our trade deadline show, and I like what they did. And I also thought that 2024 wouldn't be bad because Cone could use his money to dominate the 1 and 2 year market to augment around still some good players, including Alvarez. In the post, you wrote kind of like that. I think you agree. Take us through your transition. Why do you believe it?
Well, I mean, I thought the options at the time were to sell Robertson, Pham, and Canha, the free agents to be, who were pretty productive. And I didn't think you'd give up a season for that. As we saw, even with paying those contracts, you didn't get a ton for those players. I didn't think they were going to totally reverse course, although other teams were saying they were talking sell. I didn't really believe that they were going to do it in the end. Eventually, when they traded Scherzer, I believed that Verlander was going to be gone as well. Paying, it's a new way to do it. It's a new way to help your future. And now 4 out of their top 8 prospects are guys they acquired. Luis Angel Acuna leading the way as their number 1 prospect. And let's not hold it against him that Ronald is his brother, because he is a very good prospect. Maybe not the power, but really good prospect. And they got 4 really good prospects, including 1 for Robertson. They did get Marco Vargas, who's a good on-base machine as an infielder. So I think their future looks better. They said they're going to be competitive. I think that's fair. I think that's really where we stand right now, because I still think their position player nucleus is good overall. Obviously, Diaz will be back and healthy next year. And, obviously they don't have a rotation right now. You've got Senga and you've got Quintana, and you need 3 starters. Maybe Peterson can be one of those starters, maybe McGill, but I wouldn't count on it. So I think they need to go out and get 3 starters. And very fortunately for them, this is one of the best free agent starting pitching markets ever. And it's not going to be as expensive as Scherzer and Verlander, but it's going to be expensive. And that's one thing Cone can do. And I think, in the end, I'm not sure exactly how he feels, but he was able to recover and get good prospects, at least by paying the money down on Scherzer and Verlander. And maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing to go out and sign Snell or a Nola or an Urias, 3, ace-type starters who are out there, Yamamoto. I think that probably isn't a bad strategy, and hope for the best and hope that they live up to their contracts. And if they don't, you can probably trade to sell it, pay it down somewhat. Now, they did have the advantage of Scherzer and Verlander being short deals. If you sign a guy for $200 million, it's a little more difficult to pay it down if he's not performing. But, I do feel, I will take them at their word. They're going to be competitive. And I think the free agent market plays into their hands, and I think they'll be okay next year.
Yeah, I actually don't think they're going to go for those kind of starters. I don't think he's going to do long-term contracts with starters right now. I don't think that, except for maybe Yamamoto. And one of the reasons is, if you've noticed, under Cone, they haven't signed anyone who was qualified offer free agent because they didn't want to give up the draft picks because they're trying to do something better. The 3 starters you mentioned, I think all get the qualifying offer thrown on them. I don't think the Mets will do that. I think they'll go after Yamamoto because he's younger, though Urias is very young. Yamamoto you don't have to worry about the QO. I think he's going to try to do 1 and 2 year things. Like I could see them, and again, this isn't as sexy, but I could see them trying to trade for Chris Sale and see if the Red Sox would include a prospect with it. Go for James Paxton, see if they could fix Luis Severino, like that kind of stuff, 1 and 2 year stuff. And if it works, then they'll use some of this prospect base to try to build it up next July. And if not, they'll flush one more time in July. And I think really tilt towards 2025. That's my suspicion of what they're going to do. I don't think they're going to play, except for Ohtani. Who I'm not sure will come east. I don't think that they'll play in the big starting pitching market.
Yeah, I think they've been eyeing Ohtani, and certainly Epler was the one who signed him with the Angels. But most importantly, Cone has been eyeing him. He went to Japan, saw him pitch over there. I do think they will go for Ohtani. We're just reading tea leaves. None of us know whether Ohtani will come east. 5 of the 7 teams who were finalists were from the West Coast last year. He ultimately signed with the Angels. So that's really the only tea leaf we have. And I think it's probably a long shot based on that. But and the fact that he told the Yankees that he couldn't see himself in a big city. he's kind of in a big city now. He's sort of in Los Angeles, but maybe draws the line somewhere. So I don't think their chances for Ohtani are great. I'm not as enthused about signing Severino or somebody like that. He's an 80 ERA.
I'm talking about the type of starter, John.
Yeah,
I think
someone is going to sign Severino, and
yeah.
maybe it'll work out. But I mean, with Cohn's wherewithal, I don't love that. And maybe things will change a little bit. Billy Epler, we don't think is going to be the guy in charge. And I know he was on your show yesterday, and he spoke about that, and he said very nicely that he's fine with them bringing somebody in above them. And I think we all believe that it's probably going to be David Stearns, who he's tried for a couple times, wasn't able to get him because Mark Anasio, the Brewers owner, who's in all his rights, declined to let him talk to him. Now the contract is up after this year, and I think we all believe it'll be Stearns. I'd still love to see Theo Epstein be a possibility. I'd like to see them have two possibilities who they're enthused about, not just one, because there might be openings elsewhere. And is there any guarantee? I know Stearns is from New York. People who know him think he would come here. He sat out this year after Mark Attanasio did not like the fact of that Hader trade. And I don't know whether it was because he yelled at him or what, or just because he wasn't going to be the long-term guy and he turned down the contract. We don't know, but, obviously he's been operating in Milwaukee where there's basically very little media, different than New York. Theo Epstein, to me, is the one who's really proven in a big market, who's won 3 championships, and I'd love to see him go for him. But, I don't know that Theo Epstein would be interested. Obviously, they talked last time and didn't work out, probably from both sides. So, we'll see how things operate. They may change with Stearns. He's used to being in a small market, so maybe he'll be very more protective of the players that you said, like Epler has been. But I'm still hopeful that they're not just world competitive. We can be over 500, that we can actually compete for the title. And with the team that they do have now, at least Yamamoto, I think that would help. But I'd like to see them compete for some of these players. And frankly, I thought third base was solved, and I think they're worried about it right now. I don't know where you stand on this now. I thought he was okay defensively. I don't know what they were expecting, but he didn't hit. Beatty did not hit. So I think that third base is a concern now, and you wonder if Matt Chapman could be on the board. Now, that's one of those big-time free agents. It's a lot of money, and they do have 2 possibilities. They also have Mauricio, who hasn't gotten a chance. I'm wondering, are they leaving Mauricio down so that he can be that full year rookie of the year next year? I don't know what the reason is that he's still down there. I can't figure it out, but I'd like to see them call him up and see if he can be the third baseman. Let's see if he can play third. And if he can't, obviously 50 games may not be a good test. If he can't, maybe then they go toward Chapman. But, I'd still like to see them compete for those big players.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, John, because you asked what I thought is, I think you and I have been around New York. And one of the things that is hard to overcome is when a player looks, let's pick a word like overwhelmed instead of scared. But whatever the word was, that's what Brett Beatty looked like playing this year. As things got worse and worse, he seemed to retreat into being overwhelmed, etc. I wonder if we're going to see some flip-flop here. I wonder if starting some point he goes to left field or right field, and he gets some time there. And if you've noticed, Mauricio is now playing third base twice a week. And I do think before the season is over, I wouldn't be surprised if Mauricio's playing a lot of third and Beatty's out in the outfield a little, and they take a look at both of those things. But I suspect that even if they do, they'll get a 1-year stopgap third baseman, Gio Urshela kind of guy, just to be sure in case they don't do Chapman. They'll get some Mark Canha-like left fielder, just to be sure in case the guy can't go out there. I think it's the one place where Cohn's money doesn't just exist at the top of the market. He can win for the guy who's getting offered $10 million. He could get 12, give him 12 or 14 to get him here if that's what he wants to do.
Yeah, so. Fair. I just on Beatty, I understand he certainly didn't hit like we expected him to hit. But, if you can recall, there have been a ton of guys who've come up to New York and weren't great for half a season. Melky Cabrera looked very nervous his first month or two. We never thought that he was going to be the player that he turned out to be. I don't want to make a judgment. I know that Beatty's stock is down, but I do think he can hit. If they find the right position.
I think he could hit. I think he could hit. Yeah. I'm wondering about third base. I wonder if you need to push him further away from the ball.
Yeah, to me, he wasn't terrible, but I saw the metrics. He is well below average.
Feet don't work great. You're at the ballpark, like third base. when we think about the really good third baseman, their feet
Yeah.
were great, and his feet didn't seem to work great.
Well, there have been a lot of guys like Wade Boggs and others who were below average defensively for at least a year, 2 years, 3 years, and became better. And
But you want them to contend next year, John. We can't have a guy Wade Boggs it for a few years.
You can live with Wade Boggs at third base. I do think they have two good hitters.
If he's Wade Boggs, they'll be good next year.
Yes, Mauricio and Beatty can hit, and they just need to find the right positions for them. They do have good prospects now. Their future looks better than I expected it to look. So, it's funny we're ending on a kind of a semi-bright note for the Mets, and Yankees we just completely buried today. But we were correct. The Yankees were a little better than the Mets, but both are much worse than I would have suspected.
The Yankees are heading towards the Mets. You mentioned people who could hit. Our next guest was certainly someone who could hit in the major leagues, and he has two sons who might be hitting in the major leagues pretty soon. That's Matt Holliday, if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. Back on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, and we're joined by somebody who has 316 homers, 7-time All-Star, World Series champion, 4 Silver Sluggers, NLCS MVP, and is going on the Hall of Fame ballot this year. So my question off of all that, Matt Holliday, is what do you think about all that in about 2 or 3 years? Probably all anyone will know you for is being the father of Jackson and Ethan Holliday.
I think it's when it's your kids, I'm perfectly fine with it. I think it happened fast. I mean, I think even at the opening press conference with Jackson at the Orioles at Camden Yards, they introduced me as Jackson Holliday's dad, and I said, "Wow, that happened fast." So they went from being my kids to I'm their dad in a pretty fast time, but I'm really proud of them. So as you guys know, when it's your kids, there's nothing that really, it doesn't bother me one bit.
Joe, good list on Matt Holliday. Obviously, an outstanding career. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but you might have. I might have missed the batting title. Also, I think he had MVP awards votes. I think at least 8 years. I might be wrong on that, but at least 8 years. So it was quite a career for Holliday, and obviously, he won a lot of games with the Cardinals there. I do want to ask you about your sons, though. I mean, I know we're turning the page very quickly to your sons from you, but 342 Jackson is hitting. I mean, I'll follow up with Ethan later, but let's ask about Jackson first of all. When did you know that he was going to be this kind of prodigy? And don't be modest, because he is a prodigy. He was pick number 1. He's in Double-A. He's 19, and he's hitting 342.
Well, I would say going back to even when he was a little kid, I remember he was obsessed with baseball. He was obsessed with hitting things. I remember, going back to, we lived in Austin, Texas early in his life in the off season, and my dad was coaching at Texas, and we were living there. And my dad, I remember him tying a string out in the outside sort of awning that had a wiffle ball tied to it. And even as early as 2 years old with his little red bat, he would go out and he would hit that wiffle ball on the string, and of course it would go up and it would wrap around, and he'd hit it as it was coming back down. So he was hitting moving targets at 2 years old. So I remember even from a very tiny age of having an incredibly fundamental swing. Like I still have pictures of when he was a kid, and just his body position and the way he was loading, and just I'd watch as an active player going, golly, I wish my swing looked more like that. Even from that stage of being, even 2-3 years old, I could see, I was like, wow, he just gets his body in really good positions. And even growing up, he played and he loved to play and loved to be around, loved to practice, loved to be at the field, loved to take ground balls. Really grew to have a real passion for baseball and love to practice it, which I think is crucial. He didn't really mature physically and really hit puberty as early as a lot of kids. So he looked young, still does, and his body, he was on the smallish side from a figure standpoint, even up until probably his junior, senior year in high school. But his skill level was always so high, and his baseball IQ. And people always said, I always told people when his strength and maturity start to come in and match his skill, he's really going to take off. And so, right about the end of his junior year, going into his senior year, he really started to kind of fill out. He started to get strong. He got faster. His arms really started kind of upticking, and really just kind of watched this sort of takeoff of going from what people would say would maybe be a late first round, early second round type of kid to being considered for the number one pick, and then on into the minor leagues and really just kind of excelling. And I think a lot of it is his brain and his mentality and his focus and how he handles failure. But from a physical standpoint, he's always been a very skilled hitter, a very skilled baseball player, and it's served him well. I think he adapts to locker rooms of older players and kids. That being around the locker room and being around older players and baseball people for a long time, I think has served him really well for a 19-year-old in Double-A that gets along with his peers and loves his teammates and has not been. I don't think he's been real homesick. He hasn't expressed that. We've tried to make it out there to hope to make this transition easy on him, but it's been a really exciting year, John, and he's played really well. So it's been a fun process, a fun journey to go through with him. But like I said earlier, I think the shared passion that we have for baseball is the thing that I love the most, and he loves to practice and he loves the grind of it. And he's always talking to me about hitting and other hitters and mechanics and what he sees and what he feels and what I think about it. And so it's a fun, as you guys know, when you find something that you share a passion with your kids, it makes it all the better. And so it's been a fun process.
Matt, you mentioned how young he looks. I remember before that draft, when I saw a picture of your son, I was like, this is the first pick in the draft? Like, I understand I'm getting old, but they look young. And you pointed it out, 19 years old. He's climbed to John's numbers, A to high A to Double-A this year. He's 19, doesn't turn 20 until December. You know this sport, your whole family. You mentioned it's a family of baseball people, and you played in the major leagues. Is he going to be able to make the next jump, real big jump, to the major leagues as early as next season? And if so, why, to your expert eye?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, obviously, you never assume that something's going to happen. But when I watch him play, and I've gotten a chance to probably see 15 games this year, 15, 16 games, and the people that I talk to him that are around every day, I get notes from people in the organization that say, they just love watching him play and his leadership. And, people send me really nice texts about, hey, Jackson is in the weight room and he's pushing heavy weight and the guys are starting to follow and people are paying attention to everything he does. And he sets such a good a standard for what it looks like in early work and in the weight room and everything he does. So I think he is mentally strong, mentally capable of playing in the major leagues soon. When I watch him on the field in Double-A, he looks like a major league player. And so he's such a confident yet humble young man. I think it's a real possibility that he's pretty close to being major league ready. And whether that's, giving him a chance in September to see what it looks like, or next year in spring training, getting a chance to make the opening day roster, or at some point next season, I think he looks and mentally he's prepared for that. So we'll see. As you said, he's only 19 and the major leagues is full of grown men, but he's got a lot of skills that make him a winning player, even at the major league level right now. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. But to answer your question, I think there's a lot of factors. I think he brings a lot of dynamics to the field. He walks a lot. He doesn't chase the zone, which, as you guys know, is very important when you're trying to play in the major leagues. He can steal a base. He can play defense. And then he uses the whole field, and I think that's important. He hits the ball the other way really well, and that'll be crucial for his success in the major leagues. So all that being said, is I think he's pretty close to being ready.
John, can I just jump in and
Sure.
ask one thing? Just because you mentioned, I asked next year, you just used the word September. Do you think there's a chance with the Orioles in the race right now that your 19-year-old son could get called up to and try to help them finish this thing off in September?
I don't have any insider information. I just know that Mike Elias didn't rule it out when somebody asked him about it. And I know the way he's playing right now. And look, if it was me, I would have him up there in the playoffs just to let him experience it. I would have a couple of their young players that maybe you're counting on in the next year or two. I think that's immeasurable experience to be around a playoff atmosphere and think about these guys for the next 5-10 years and getting them exposed to what that looks like and just the intensity and the excitement of playoff baseball. I don't know that. I would say probably not. They have so many good young players, and you have options at shortstop with Gunnar and Westberg and Joey Ortiz, and they have so many great young players. But I just think that for me with Mike Elias not ruling it out, and if Jackson continues to play the way he's playing right now, shoot, you never know. But to let him be around it and Kerstead and some of these young guys that you could expose to the environment of playoff baseball, a playoff run down the stretch, I think it would be valuable.
People are getting to know Jackson certainly when he was the number one pick and all that, and now you have another son who's another huge prospect, and I don't know if he's going to be the first pick a couple of years from now, but people are speculating that he could be as well. Obviously genetics plays a role in this, as we documented your career, but do you think it's genetics, or you are coaching at Oklahoma State. I know helped out some major leaguers now. How much of this do you think is genetics and how much is coaching, and where does Ethan stand right now?
Yeah, I think, John, it's a lot of things. These two boys grew up in the clubhouse with me. Thankfully, I played in a couple organizations that allowed a lot of access for them to be around a lot of great players to see and experience and grow to love the game in a really cool way. So I think obviously genetics plays a part, but I think passion for the game, love of practice, getting exposed to great major league players that give them tips as young people, the whole nature versus nurture, like that whole phenomenon. Like, I don't know that we'll ever know for sure, but he's a bigger kid. So he's 6'4" and probably 210 right now, 205. He just had a great weekend at the baseball factory in Dallas, played really, really well. Just a different player than Jackson. But he's got a great future. He's an incredible young man. So we'll see. Like I said, I don't want to, put the cart before the horse as far as, how high he'll get drafted, but he's got plenty of potential to make baseball a career out of it. And I love watching it. Like I said, again, when you have a shared passion with your kids and they say, "Dad, you want to go hit? Dad, will you go hit me ground balls?" I can do that all day. When it's their idea, they're pushing me to help them. I love it. So I think I do have some knowledge, obviously getting a chance to play as long as I did and play with different players and be around different coaches and gain the knowledge that I was able to gain and having a long career. I think I've been able to help them along the way with a lot of it. A lot of it, I think, mentally more too, and how to deal with failure and how to be a good teammate and just kind of from that, the things that are most important and making sure that they understand the things that are most important. So I think it's a lot of those things. It's probably a combination of all of that, but it's, it comes down to how bad do you want it and how much do you love to practice and what are you willing to sacrifice for me? And they seem to have that desire to be great.
I think Dad was being a little modest, right? I think your son Ethan was just named the MVP of that baseball factory event. And I think that event is generally for guys who are going to be drafted in 2024. Your son is a 2025 projection, so he's younger than most of the people there. That's MVP. John used the word genetics. I'm just wondering, how does one of the foremost right-hand hitters of his generation end up with two left-hand hitting sons?
I'm not sure. To be honest with you, the little guy, my 10-year-old is lefty. So I don't know how this happens, Joel. My daughter has a really good right-handed swing. She doesn't play softball, but when we play wiffle ball out in the yard, I think, that looks more like me. She's got this really flat-handed swing. So I don't know how it happened. My wife's brother is a lefty, but other than that, I can't seem to figure out how this happened. Maybe they realized when they watched all those sliders going down and away from me as a right-hand hitter from Jake Peavy and Max Scherzer, maybe they saw all those things and thought, you know what, maybe I'd rather stand on the left side where it comes into me more often than goes away from me. So I'm not sure how it happened, but I'm happy for them that it did because I know that they won't be exposed to the likes. I mean, I know we have lefties and lefty specialists and all this, but you don't have to look at that slider going down away quite as often as you do as a right-hand hitter.
A good answer to a trick question there by Joel. I didn't imagine you'd come up with such a good response to that. You've done so well with your sons. Obviously, you are a part-time coach at Oklahoma State now. I know you considered becoming the Cardinals bench coach. Teams must be clamoring for you to be a coach. Your record is incredible to this point. Do you see that in your future, coaching, managing, anything like that at the major league level, or is that too time consuming and you want to see, how all your children, grow up?
Yeah, I think, being blessed enough to play as long as I did, you realize what it is to play a full major league season and what you do miss. I miss being part of a team at the highest level. When I took the Cardinals bench coach job, it seemed like a great opportunity, and it is a great opportunity. And to be a bench coach for a great organization with one of my great friends in the game as the manager, it seemed like an incredible opportunity, and it was. But when as spring training got closer, realizing what I was going to miss and the sacrifice that it takes to be all in, and I didn't want to be sort of 1 foot in and 1 foot out, wishing I was somewhere else. Realizing that wasn't good for them, it wasn't good for me. And just, realizing that, hey, this isn't the time for me. I want to be at Ethan's high school games. I want to be able to, at the drop of a hat, go see Jackson if he needs me to come up and maybe help him if he's a little off. And I have 2 younger kids. I have a daughter who's 13 and a son who's 10 that have lots of activities that I would be, sacrificing for my own sort of personal career ambition. So all that to say is, do I miss coaching and think, or maybe miss the idea of being part of a major league staff and maybe one day managing? Is that something that, deep down I would like to pursue someday? Yeah, I think so. But at the expense of what? And I think that's something that rolls through my mind all the time, is when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And the things that I would be saying no to at this time I didn't want to say no to them. And so it's tempting. I love the idea. But I think at this time and probably in the next few years, getting a chance to watch the older boys and my 2 youngers do all their activities and getting a chance to just kind of be where I want to be, as opposed to kind of, having a schedule that's set for you, is something that, it's just it's just hard to pass it up. And so I hope that answered your question. But yeah, I like the idea of someday, being part of a big league organization.
Matt, I think you're almost the perfect person to answer something I've been thinking about a lot as I watch, and maybe this is the old man on the lawn and every generation says it about the previous generation, but I watch Major League Baseball these days and I feel like just technically it's not a well-played game. And I'm just wondering, between showcase events for kids, which I'm sure both of your kids have had, and like the tutoring where we're trying to perfect this. And by the way, I think all this is good, but like where we're trying to just perfect the individual. Is something being lost about the team? You mentioned Jackson's baseball IQ. You're watching this. Are we not focusing enough on baseball IQ and teamwork, etc., as we're developing players?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely when you think about the travel baseball and the showcase circuit and getting a chance to watch Jackson go through it and now Ethan go through it. They don't practice much, if ever, especially particularly in the summer. I know the high school is a little different. They get a little more practice and a little more team. But I think to your point, I do think that it is very individualized with the lessons and the sort of like you go to these showcases and you take 10 ground balls and you have the kid that they're crow hopping and they throw it to first base and they throw it 20 feet over the first baseman's head, but it reads at 94 miles an hour across the diamond, and that gets acknowledged and ranked. And then you have kids trying to hit it the exit velo, they hit it 102, so that's a measurable that gets ranked. Okay, but I'd rather watch him take infield and watch him turn double plays and get outs. And like, if you get the guy out, it doesn't matter if you throw it 95 across the diamond. I think we have kind of swung over there a little bit too far, and not as playing with instincts. And I don't think, and again, this isn't us being old, get off my lawn, but the old days of just playing wiffle ball or being outside and playing with your friends and playing ragdoll and playing and just the competitive element of trying to win and doing everything at the expense of winning. I think we have gotten away from that a little bit, and I think even the analytics would say don't bunt, don't sacrifice sort of giving yourself up and hitting a grounder to second to get the guy over from second to third. And I think sometimes the numbers they can't quantify I guess the winning part of small parts of the game. And so when we don't acknowledge it, we can't quantify it. It's not taught. It's not emphasized at the minor league level. The emphasis is more on guys getting to the major leagues and getting there and really winning and losing seems to be not really that big of a deal. Where that competitive spirit of, hey, let's win. I think that's one thing, particularly with Jackson, that I've noticed that even at the minor league level, like he wants to win these games. And, sort of somebody on the outside looking in would say, well, Bowie's 5 or 10 games under 500. They're not really going to make the playoffs. And when I see like the emotion and the way he's playing, and I talk to him and he's pissed when they lose and he wants to win, I think it's really healthy. And I think that's something like, to your point, that maybe we have gotten away from a little bit, and something that I think that, from a skill level, hey, can you hit a ground ball to second base on command? Even if you're the 3-hole, can you set your teammate up to get that game-winning run home at third base? It's way easier to hit a pop fly or to hit a hard grounder up the middle because the infield's in to score that run, as opposed to I'm going to be the hero and I strike out and now he's still on second and my teammate has to hit a single for us to get that winning run home or that tying run home. So I think we have lost maybe a little bit of that, but I think it'll come back around. I think the game works in waves, and I think it already is coming back around a little bit with more contact and more stolen base, a little more manufactured runs, and but yeah, I agree with you.
Matt, I want to thank you for joining us again, and it's really been terrific. And Joel asked you one trick question. I'm going to ask you one hard question for my last question, but people can see what a smart guy you are and how you'll be able to handle it. You were obviously part of a lot of winning teams, the best moment in Rocky history, but then certainly with the Cardinals, perennial winners, world champions. You almost went back there again for this year. So I want to ask you, do you have any theories? I mean, so many surprises. We talk about the Mets and Yankees all the time on this podcast. The White Sox have been a surprise, the Padres and the Cardinals. I mean, they win every year. I know you're at a distance. It may not be that easy for you, but do you have any theories on it? And I know that Nolan Arenado is particularly close to you, had a similar type career, perennial All-Star, started with the Rockies. He went to the Cardinals. I know he does not take losing very well generally. I didn't have to see him at the All-Star game to know this. How's he doing? And do you feel like this is just a one-off with the Cardinals and they'll be back next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of factors, John. I think let's start. I think the bullpen, you can start there. There was a lot of question marks, and Helsley has been hurt and not quite as effective as maybe they had projected. Gallegos hasn't been as effective. I think they, at one point when they were still sort of teetering on whether to go for it or to sell, their bullpen had blown the most saves, and they had blown the most late inning leads, and that has carryover. As a player, when you blow a lead, it affects the next day, it affects the team morale. When you blow two leads in a row, it affects So I think that I would start there, and that the bullpen has not been what they had hoped, and maybe they fell short in and maybe getting strikeout guys and kind of bolstering. I see the best teams, they dominate that 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. They don't let leads get away, and I think the Cardinals have let a lot of leads get away. I think that in the rotation, obviously my greatest friend, Waino, has had a very difficult year. It started sort of with the injuries, and he just hasn't been able to recapture. I think they were counting on him being able to repeat something close to last year or the year before. He hasn't, been able to get it going. Jack Flaherty was good, but not kind of what they had hoped as far as like his peak years. So there was a lot of question marks, I think, going into the season, where you dream on these guys sort of having their best season. And sometimes when you do that, when you kind of anticipate that, if this guy does this, there was a little bit too many question marks in the pitching staff of, we need this guy to do this and this guy to do that. And when that didn't happen, like I said, a lot of late inning losses, that makes it very hard to compete. And I think they will bounce back. I think there's a solid nucleus. Obviously Jordan Walker getting a lot of experience should help him next year to really kind of take that next step. They have a couple young guys coming, and Mason Wynn and Tink Hintz, that I think are going to be impact caliber players. And then I think Goldie will have a better year next year. I don't think it's obviously been the MVP year he had last year. But I know Nolan, is not happy with losing and not happy with, he went there to win. But I think sometimes you have to look at how hard baseball is, and to win every year, and to have you're going to have a year, every organization does. The Cardinals have been able to avoid that losing season, that sort of dip, for so long, and where other teams, they're experiencing these dips. So I think it's a culmination of things that just kind of went wrong this year. And then you got to the deadline and then sort of threw in the towel and traded off your two best starting pitchers. And so, now it's more about for next year, and you start looking at these wins don't really matter. And you're trying to figure out some young pieces and whether they are part of the team going forward. So, all in all, John, I would say that it just a lot of things just kind of didn't go as well as they had hoped, and I think they will bounce back. I think that they'll go out and sign a couple of starting pitchers next year and bounce back. So that's my hope for them. Obviously an organization that I love. Ollie's one of my favorite people in the game, and Nolan's one of my closest friends. So I think they'll be back next year.
Matt, just for the record, he keeps describing that as a trick question. I knew Jackson hit left-handed. I watched video of Ethan hit left-handed this morning, and I thought to myself, well, I know Matt Holliday. I actually covered him for a year in New York. I just was curious about the lefty thing. To wrap up, I want to ask you about another lefty hitter, because it moves us forward a little. I believe you work with Cody Bellinger in the offseason, and Bellinger's had a great bounce-back season, and he's a free agent at the end of the year. So teams are going to have to decide, are the 2 years before that where he really struggled the real Cody Bellinger, or is he back to this MVP level Cody Bellinger? What do you know from working with him and knowing him to think that he's a good gamble going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's a couple of things. I think injuries, he had the shoulder injury, and he had some been dinged up, which I think sometimes your body it starts to get in bad positions because of the injury. And so I think while he might have been healthy, I think he had gotten into some bad habits. He had gotten his body into some positioning that we talked about, like his head was in a really bad spot. And, he was kind of getting in positions that weren't allowing him to use his God-given ability, his talent, to where his head was sort of down and forward, and then he would have to retreat to create space and then swing hard to make up time. So I tried to help him with some direction and some like keeping his swing in the strike zone longer and just keeping his head up a little bit. And I'm not trying to take credit for the season he's had. He's had an amazing season. I know the Cubs have done an amazing job of coaching him and helping him get to where he is today. I would say, to me, Joel, I think he is more of what you see this year than maybe the last 2 years for a couple of reasons. If I was him and I was the Cubs, I would try to make that work. I think that's a good marriage. I think that he fits that city. I think he fits that organization. Seems happy, like he seems excited about playing there. It looks like they have a group of guys that he kind of fits well. And that park, especially in the warm days, as you guys know, is a very hitter friendly park on a good day. I think he's got speed that allows him, if he's putting the ball in play, to hit for a high average like he's doing this year at 328. I think he's more of the player that we remember from those MVP type seasons and less of the last 2 years. But like I said, I think Chicago's a great fit for him, and hopefully the two sides can get together and make that a long-term relationship.
Well, Matt, I got to say, this was so good. I didn't even get to ask you about quarterback Matt Holliday. I didn't get to ask you about Colorado Rocky Matt Holliday. I didn't get to ask you about Oakland A Matt Holliday, now that team might be leaving the city. So we know Jackson's going to be in the major league soon. Ethan to follow. We hope you join us again at some point in the future. And Matt, thank you so much for joining us this time on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And anytime you guys, I love to talk baseball, particularly with you guys, and know that you guys love the game like I do. So be happy to come on anytime. And I love to brag on my kids. I probably went too long with my answers and cost you some of your topics you had ready, but I can stick to the script a little better next time if you are willing to have me back.
We're willing to renew that contract. Thank you so much,
Definitely.
Matt. All the best to you and your kids.
Thank you, guys. Thanks you so much.
John, I know one of the hits was our guest, Matt Holliday, who was really excellent on his career and on his two children who are ahead, steaming towards the major league. John, we will close as usual with hit or error. What do you got this week?
Yeah, Matt was fantastic. My hit this week is MLB. They're up 9.3% in attendance. Who would have expected that? I know the new rules were a hit early, but not this big a hit. And it's good to see some positivity that we can talk about in baseball. I know tend to be, not you, but I and others tend to be critical at times. And it's great to see that baseball is up 9.3%. That's a big rise. Give them credit.
Yeah, I mean, John, what's the chances that both of us are going to do hits in the same week?
25%, as you know.
Well, that's the actual figure. If you do it by that, knowing our personalities, I don't think it's
fair.
It's a little bit like the Yankees playoff chances at 5%. I don't like us at 25%.
You're right. I'm wrong.
Positive. I'm gonna actually give it to one of our former guests, Kim Eng. She needed to improve her offense. She did that in the offseason a little with a Roz, for sure. It's going to win the National League batting title. At the deadline, I don't think anyone thought it was a big deal to get Jake Berger and Josh Bell. Those two guys combined in their first 24 combined games, 319 average, 975 OPS, 6 homers, 14 runs, 16 RBIs. The Marlins, after beginning the second half very poorly, I think they lost 17-22. I think they've won 5 of their last 6 or 6 of the last 7 as we speak, in part because their offense has gotten a lot better because Kim Eng decided to go for it. And as we speak, they're the third wild card.
Yes, I'm glad that you praised a former guest of ours. She did a terrific job. It was a little bit surprising at the end that she made 2 big trades like that. I know they were emphasizing contact, as we talked about when she was on, and got a Rise, who's the perfect contact hitter, and they kind of went the other way. You're right. Bell's been incredible. Berger, he did all those numbers against the Yankees, so I don't know if we put an asterisk on that because it was against the Yankees, but he's been really good as well.
Last punch at the Yankees. Thanks for listening.
You got most of the hits in. I needed one.
I have a feeling those hits are going to keep coming for the rest of the year. Lead balloon. Thank you for joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, a podcast from the New York Post. As always, Andrew Hartz and Jake Brown, our producers, help us get through the show. Don't forget, the show drops on the Yes app about noon every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate, and review us, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Give us a 5-star rating. And we're getting closer to the end of this season. We hope you stick with us the whole way on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.